down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. It's an open mic night for photographers. Get ready for 60 minutes of your photography questions in real time with answers from your host, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, thanks for joining me for another live episode of TogChat. I'm Joe Edelman, and I'm back from PhotoPlus Expo in New York City, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you about what's new, what's cool, and what's not so great. So, in case you have never been to one of these large photography expos, I highly recommend that you try to go, but maybe not for the reasons that you would all expect me to say. So hopefully it goes without saying that all of the major camera manufacturers were there. I mean, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Olympus, Panasonic, Fuji, Phase One, heck, even Pentax was there, right? The lens companies were all there. Tamron, Sigma, and Tokina. The lighting companies, Interfit, Hensel, Ari, Westcott. The peripheral companies like Tether Tools, Magmod, LumaQuest, Rogue, Think Tank, Manfrotto, SBK Cases, and heck, a few hundred others, like literally. So this year's show was much bigger and, in my opinion, much more exciting because there were a lot of big announcements that were timed to happen either right before or during the show, which was actually pretty cool. Okay, so before I tell you all about the stuff that I want to tell you is, you know, what went happen and what was announced, I want to tell you what I think is the coolest part about these shows for me, because believe it or not, it's not the gear. However, you know, this is like one of the few weekends every year that I get to geek out over gear and embrace my inner geartographer. But for me, seriously, the greatest thing about these shows, it's the people. I mean, really, where else can you go and spend 4 days with thousands of people who all share the same interests as you? Where else can you go and rub elbows with and talk to all of your photography idols without having to pay to do so? And of course, you know, for a YouTuber like me, it's a great opportunity to meet the people behind the usernames that watch my videos. And it was great to meet so many of you and have a chance to talk face to face. And I know that there were a few of you that were there, but we kept missing each other. James, I know you're here tonight, and Tony and Duke and Ron. Hopefully we can catch up with each other at the next one. So I did run into a few other content creators at PhotoPlus, which was a nice treat. My buddy, Mr. Robert Vanelli, who writes for Photo Focus and has become a great friend. One of my other highlights was seeing my good friend Manny Ortiz, who you see me interview here on TogChat. But more importantly, was not meeting Manny, but finally meeting his much better half, Diana. And the fellow YouTube photographer that I was most excited to meet for the very first time, all the way from Great Britain, the incredible Mr. Gavin Hoey. Now, if you don't know Gavin Hoey and you like my videos, be sure to subscribe to his channel. I will put a link in the description when I'm finished. Gavin does videos for Adorama TV. He also works out of his small home studio, and he is a Micro Four Thirds shooter and an Olympus visionary. I think in the UK they call them Olympus ambassadors, but here in the US they are Olympus visionaries. And that was actually the second reason why I was really excited to have an opportunity to chat with him at PhotoPlus, but we'll get to that later, okay? So, you know, as photographers, I share a lot of the same values that he does, and his work, it's simply incredible. So do check him out, okay? The second coolest part of a show like this is simply being able to see different gear that I'm not used to and not familiar with. In person, touch it, test it, oftentimes be able to talk with the people who actually invented it or designed it, which is so cool. I had the opportunity to chat with Mr. Quest Couch, who is the inventor behind the LumaQuest speedlight modifiers, and Mr. Spencer, and I really hope I'm not butchering his name here, but Mr. Spencer Barup, who's the inventor of the Magmod speedlight modifiers. Now, I'm going to be launching a video series in a few weeks about speedlight modifiers, and you'll learn a lot more about these two gentlemen and their products, along with some other really good modifiers that are on the market. So overall, in addition to having more exhibitors than recent years, the announcements at this year's PhotoPlus, they were actually pretty big. If you haven't heard about the Sony a7R III by now, you must be living under a rock. So the latest in the Sony lineup, you ready? It boasts 42.4 megapixels from a back illuminated full frame sensor. Sony promises up to 15 stops of dynamic range at the lower ISOs, 4K recording up to 120 frames per second, 10 frames per second burst shooting, 5-axis image stabilization with a 5.5 stop compensation, 399 point phase detect autofocus, and 425 point contrast detect autofocus systems. That's a lot of focus points. An ISO range from 100 to 32,000, a 650 shot life battery, built-in Wi-Fi, built-in Bluetooth, and dual SD cards. Pretty impressive stats. The Sony a7R III, it's expected to be available for purchase at the end of November. You can pre-order it now. You can get it for a mere $3,198 for the body. And other big news from PhotoPlus, the software company MacFun had a huge announcement, and that is that they are no longer called MacFun. Their new name? Skylum. This 7-year-old company, they got their start as an app developer, and they launched programs like Aurora HDR and more recently, Luminar. Now their software is going to be available on both Mac and PC, and hence the name change to Skylum. So in addition to Skylum, the California-based DxO, they announced their acquisition of the Nik line of software from Google. Yay! There's life for Nik. And they also rebranded their popular DxO Optics Pro to DxO PhotoLab. Both of these companies, DxO and the new Skylum, are obviously gunning for Adobe after all the recent changes to Lightroom and the fact that companies like Adobe and Apple, they really seem to have abandoned photographers in favor of a more broad base of consumer products. In fact, Adobe had a table at the show, and I kind of felt bad for the two guys that were there because they were definitely under the gun for the weekend, answering questions and not talking to a lot of really happy customers. So there were also some really great lens announcements as well at the show. So to partner with your brand new Sony a7R III, Sony announced a 24-105 f4G lens, and more interestingly, and really cool because their line is expanding, they announced the development of an FE 400mm f2.8 G Master lens. Olympus, they added to their Pro line of Micro Four Third lenses with a 45mm f1.2 and a 17mm f1.2. Kareem, thank you so much for the super chat. I really, really appreciate it. So keep in mind, on Micro Four Thirds, for the 35mm comparison, you double the numbers. So that's kind of the equivalent of having a 90mm lens, which is a great portrait lens, and also a, let's see, 17.7, it's like a 24mm lens on the wide angle side. So two really nice lenses there. And I can tell you that those Olympus Pro Series lenses, really, really sweet. Sigma announced a 16mm f1.4, what they're calling a C lens. The C stands for contemporary. That's going to be available for Sony, Olympus, and Panasonic, where in the Micro Four Thirds, it's going to be equivalent to a 24mm f1.4 lens. According to the Sigma reps at the show, the optical design of this contemporary lens will rival the best of their Art series lenses. So this is meant to be a high-end lens from Sigma. Switching gears to color calibration across multiple devices, and this little gadget was awesome. I got to see this firsthand. X-Rite's new i1 Studio aims to make color calibrating across a range of devices more streamlined. So in the kit, it includes a spectrophotometer that will allow you to profile monitors, projectors, scanners, mobile devices, that's a big one, and printers. There's also a new iStudio software that allows you to create and save color profiles of your various devices. And they threw in a new black and white print module that will allow you to create 5 custom profiles for black and white images. The iStudio includes a the i1 Studio includes a 24 color patch target for building your custom profiles and custom white balances. It works with a mobile app to calibrate iOS devices, and it's shipping now. It's available for $489. Another aspect of the expo this year that was actually nice to see. There were several, not one or two, several large format film camera manufacturers there. And honestly, even though I'm not a film guy and really have no desire to be, it's great to see the view cameras and even the old school press cameras still being made. It's really nice. And we're talking some really quality gear. So you're asking, what was the not so cool part, right? Two things, really. One, the geartographer in me wanted to buy like one of everything, but that's not practical. More importantly, one of the things that I found very interesting and I wanted to talk about, just to get the thoughts out there and make people think a little bit. It was the China Pavilion. It was set up in the middle of the show floor. So in the very middle of the entire show floor, there was this long row section called the China Pavilion. It included a whole bunch of Chinese companies that were showing everything from speedlight flash units to tripods to light stands to lots of LED lighting and honestly a whole bunch of other things, even like smartphone lenses, you name it. Now, before you jump to any conclusions, I'm not about to go bashing Chinese manufacturing or spouting some America First crap. No, please. But I want to plant this thought in your minds so that it's something that you consider if and when you purchase these Chinese products. A lot of the gear that I saw in the Chinese Pavilion, and I checked out most of it, it was actually really nice. Well designed, well made, and definitely a lot cheaper than a lot of the big brand names that we are all familiar with. So this was something I struggled with a little bit because my concern is that there's a bigger picture that I think every one of us in the photography community, whether you're amateur or professional, but if you buy equipment of any kind, I think we have a responsibility to be aware of this bigger picture. So I'm not going to try and tell you what's right or wrong, but I want you to consider it. So I want to start by admitting I have purchased gear in the past from some of these Chinese companies. And believe me, there's a lot more than just the ones that were represented at PhotoPlus. You know, these are companies that are essentially producing knockoffs of bigger, more well-known, and more expensive brands. They reverse engineer the products. They sell them for less, oftentimes a lot less. And let's face it, we all like to save money, right? So, an example, companies like Yangwano. This is a great example of a company that's basically taking another company's innovation and making a profit from it. They've shown pretty much a blatant disregard for intellectual property by basically cloning Canon flashes and Canon lenses. Now, the problem with this situation is that the companies that are being copied, such as Canon, they're the companies that are paying for the research and development and the strategizing to bring us new and innovative and better quality gear. So if the photography community is going to support these Chinese companies who are simply undercutting the major manufacturers, then we're going to reach a point where it's not profitable for these big companies to innovate. And when they stop innovating, we all suffer at that point. So if you dig deep into the product lines of a lot of these companies, you'll find that a few of them truly understand the industry and they are working to make a difference. I would give you Godox as an example. Unfortunately, in many cases, you're going to find companies, and there were companies represented at the show that clearly don't have an understanding of the photography industry and the way photographers work and what we want in our gear. And basically, they view the industry as a target that they can easily replicate products, and they have the ability to create really large profit margins because they have cheaper manufacturing costs and pretty much little to no overhead on the research and development side. You know, on the flip side, the bigger brand names, to be fair, they also have a bigger responsibility to work to improve their efficiency and keep their costs down without sacrificing quality. I'll give you a company I talk about a lot, and that's Westcott. Here's a company that, in my opinion, has well-made gear. But as far as I'm concerned, they inflate their prices. So for me, I've stopped buying from these Chinese companies unless they've demonstrated a true understanding of the industry and the needs of photographers, like Godox. I've also made it a point to speak out and to stop buying from companies who overcharge, like Westcott. So, those are my Tog thoughts for this week. But before we move on, the next big show in the U.S. is Imaging USA in Nashville, Tennessee in January, followed by WPPI in Las Vegas in February. And in March, there's the photography show in Birmingham, England. And the big one next September is Photokina in Cologne, Germany. I hope to see you guys at one of these shows. And if you make it there, make sure you catch up to me and say hi. I would love to meet you. So, gang, we got a pretty good crowd in here tonight. Sven's here. Sven, I didn't see any comments from you earlier. I was afraid you didn't make it tonight. Mark Anderson's here. Kareem, Mel, Peter's here. Peter, I'll tell you what I like about the Pelican case in a minute. Don't worry. Ezekiel, Steve, Tony, Tom. I saw Doreen go by earlier. Ron, I got to meet Ron while I was at the show. How you doing, Ron? Linda, Maurice, Tardif. Thank you once again, gang, for spending your Monday evening with me. It is always greatly, greatly appreciated. So let's get a little bit of quick business out of the way, okay? Obviously, tonight we're going to, talk about whatever questions you have for the rest of the evening. I'm in good shape time-wise. This could be 2 weeks in a row that I'm actually on schedule, which means it's probably going to snow here in Pennsylvania. So just a quick reminder, gang. Hunt's Photo and Video is the photo retailer that has been kind enough to sponsor the Tog Chats that we are doing. Please check them out at huntsphotoandvideo.com. And if you are a photographer that is looking to get into the LED lighting, specifically the Edgelit Pros by Savage that you see right there, okay? Hunt has provided a 15% off discount on those lights, whether you get the single lights or the kits. You can find a discount code for that in the description below the video. So hopefully you'll check that out. And you guys stepped it up last week, and I really, really appreciate it. I told you guys that I had like a string going with the PhotoPlus Share Your Lighting contest, and it was broken. One of the winners was not one of my followers. Well, I'm really pleased to say we're back on track. Last week, it was one of my followers that won the prize. In fact, let me switch over here, and I'm going to show you his photos here. Here are Sean's pictures, his finish shot, as well as the behind-the-scenes shot. And Sean was the winner of last week's prize. So this week, PhotoPlus is giving away, what are they giving away? They're giving away one of the PhotoPlus light discs, a 41-inch by 74-inch. That's a big one, okay? White soft gold. You don't have to show PhotoPlus gear in the picture. All you need is a finished shot. It can be in a studio, it can be on location, and behind the scenes. It could be a picture of people, like I shoot, or it could be a picture of glassware, whatever you want. Show the finished picture and the behind the scenes shot. You're going to email that picture to tell us at promarkbrands.com. I'm going to put that email address here in the chat window for the live video, and also I'll give you the link to PhotoPlus's Facebook page, so you can check that out if you have questions. I hope to see the streak continue and to see one of you folks win this week's contest again. All right, gang. And then the last piece, you know the drill here. It's that social media stuff. Please, just take 1 second. Hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that yet. Please do that. We're getting really close to that 100,000 mark, okay? Social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those are the three where you'll find me the most often. And of course, comments are always greatly appreciated. Okay, so let me dig into the chat window here and see what's cooking with questions. So Kareem, you won once? Awesome. Very good. I'm glad to know that you won. That's great. I want to see lots more of you guys winning here, okay? So James Holland, if you're going to be at Imaging USA, I hope to see you there too. I was supposed to be at Imaging USA last year, and unfortunately, because of the weather that was happening in Atlanta, of all places, I couldn't get a plane out of Allentown, so wound up unfortunately not making the trip, which really sucked. So I am looking forward to making it this year. Plus, it's Nashville, so can't have much more fun than Nashville. Well, maybe Vegas, but still looking forward to that. So let's see here. Ton, innovation has to remain constant and cost-effective for consumers to prefer to purchase from. Indeed, it does, Ton. And that's really, you know, my biggest concern. So I don't want to make it sound like the Chinese are the only part of the problem. They're entrepreneurs. They see an opportunity. You know, they're seizing that opportunity. I think that, you know, probably two of the biggest companies that we should look at, and believe me, they're not the only ones, but, you know, we look at Canon and Nikon. Obviously, we know that they're struggling tremendously with innovation. They're two companies that have tremendous legacy. And for them to innovate, especially into the mirrorless realm, they've got to be able to find ways to carry that legacy forward. Otherwise, they're going to lose pretty much all of their remaining customer base. But at the same time, these companies that have to get smarter at the way they do business. They have to get smarter in their manufacturing processes, all of it. They've got to look for ways to you know, save money, to be more efficient. And this applies, as far as I'm concerned, this applies to every company out there. You know, I pick on Westcott a lot. Westcott makes great gear. But, you know, as an example, the PhotoPlus Rapidome, if you take everything that's in the box and then you price that out on Westcott, you're going to spend about $140 more for the Westcott. And it is not a better quality or a better build. It's doggone near the exact same thing with a very, very few minor differences in the way it's built, but not differences in features or quality. So I'm sorry, but how do you justify that kind of money? You simply don't. And even from a PR standpoint, as far as I'm concerned, Westcott's, you know, making bad steps because, for instance, they have those really, really nice LED panels that they put out for $5,000. And that's one thing that they cost $5,000. But then you go and you put a name like Peter Hurley on it as an endorsement. Come on, let's not kid ourselves here. There's got to be a reason for him to put his name on it, meaning he's getting money. So I mean, no disrespect to Peter Hurley. He's a great guy. He's a great photographer. But I don't need to be putting money in another photographer's pocket when I buy my gear. So how about if we take his name off of it, improve the production process a little bit, and we bring those things down to a much more reasonable price point? That's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. So Mark Anderson, you mentioned alternatives to Photoshop for photographers. Do you have a recommendation? You missed writing down the ones that I said earlier. Too bad you blew it. No, I'm kidding. Of course. I'd probably, you know, right now, and so this is one of those things. There's actually a lot of alternatives out there. I think that the ones that are worth watching right now, so my opinion, I would encourage you, because I'm sure the minute I start answering this, you're going to see some other feedback come into the chat window. I would definitely encourage you to look at Luminar. If we compare Luminar to, and actually pause, I'm sorry, let me take a step back. The phrase that you typed, Photoshop alternatives. I would argue that there's not a great Photoshop alternative at all yet. A lot of these other programs like Luminar, like the DxO Photo Lab, etc., they are starting to get involved with layers. They are starting to kind of morph a little bit so they work similar to a Photoshop. But when you start looking at things like Liquify, a lot of the high-end retouching tools that Photoshop has, the alternatives don't have that yet. So I feel more comfortable discussing them at this point as more of a Lightroom alternative, because I think if we're looking strictly at Lightroom, there are absolutely alternatives right now, Luminar being one of them. At the moment, Luminar does not have the asset management capabilities that Photoshop has, that Lightroom has. But Skylum, or MacFun, whichever name you still want to use. And by the way, just to give you guys a little bit more background, they still go by the name of MacFun. Basically, by 2018, they are going to be completely converted over. And by the beginning of 2018, they expect that all of their software offerings will be available on both platforms, Windows and Mac. You didn't hear this from me, but there will be an announcement from them tomorrow, kind of moving in that direction. Or excuse me, not tomorrow. Today's Thursday. So Wednesday, there will be an announcement. So don't tell anybody, okay? But it's kind of moving in that direction to get everything set up on both platforms. But they have committed to building asset management tools into Luminar. I'm not super familiar with the DxO options, but I can tell you that they've gotten great reviews. I know quite a few people whom I respect and whom they're power shooters. They do a lot of shooting that use those programs and find a lot of value in them. There's some open source stuff that's out there. There's a lot of different options. To be completely honest, would I abandon Photoshop or Lightroom today for one of these other alternatives? I don't think that I would. I have Luminar installed on the machine that I'm working on right now that I'm talking to you from. It is a very impressive program. If you've never used it or seen it, download the free trial before you spend money on it. Do understand that when you open it up, it's going to take you back a little bit because it's laid out differently and works kind of a lot differently than Photoshop does. So there's a little bit of a learning curve, but this is a small learning curve. You folks hear me talk a lot about the learning curve with Capture One, which, by the way, as a Lightroom alternative, if you want to go high end, Capture One is absolutely a great Lightroom alternative. But more money, much more powerful program, definitely a learning curve. I highly recommend it if you're going to shoot tethered, if you're at a point where you're doing high-end work and you've really got discipline in your working methods. But for the average shooter, Capture One's probably going to be a little bit on the upside. So Luminar, the first time you open it up, it's a little disarming in the sense, it's a whole kind of new interface type setup. But it's actually, it's a pretty easy interface. I'm very impressed with the program. By no means am I saying and or hinting that I would consider leaving Photoshop for it. I seriously doubt that. But, the reality of it is as photographers, we've got to keep our eyes and our minds open a little bit more to what's going on in the industry. Even when it comes to computers, I'm sure you've seen the headlines. A lot of photographers are leaving Mac, leaving Apple, switching back to Windows, that kind of stuff. I am seriously looking at my options right now, considering my options. I've been, I was late coming to Apple. I've been an Apple person and completely in the Apple ecosystem for about 7 years. I don't want to leave it. I love the Apple operating system. I love the simplicity of it. I've had great luck with all of their equipment, but Apple is not producing equipment that is going to help me continue moving forward and growing. They are starting to put limits on their equipment from a professional level. So I'm by no means, going to jump right out there, but at the same time, it's something that I realize I have to pay much, much more attention to. I will be honest with you, tomorrow I'm going to take a look at a Pixel phone, a Google Pixel phone. If you'd have talked to me a year ago, I would have already ordered my iPhone 10 by now. But there are a lot of reasons that, including the fact that I do a lot on the Google ecosystem, that I think it would be prudent for me to at least research the Pixel firsthand. I want to see it. There's been a lot of discussion, debate over the screen and the screen quality and that type of stuff. But I think that people are overreacting for the wrong reasons when it comes to the stuff that you're reading about the screen. So I want to go see it firsthand and take a look at it. But I'm actually considering leaving the iPhone. And I love the iPhones. Love them. Love them. Love them. But at the same time, I've got to be realistic about the fact that I use Gmail, I use Google Drive, Google Keep, I use a lot of Google products. So given that this Google Pixel is the first Android phone that's got a pure Android operating system on it, which is super fast, we'll get lots of updates as they come out because they're coming right from Google. It's something that I think, I have to do my due diligence on and at least take a good look at it. So that was a really long answer to your Photoshop alternatives, but I hope that helps out. So let's see here. Mech to see, do you think there should be a softbox specifically designed for LED lighting and accommodate most sizes of panels? Well, if you think about it, a softbox is a softbox is a softbox. I mean, it's a modifier, right? So I can tell you there are already soft boxes for LED panels. I have LED panels that I have soft boxes for. So obviously you're not going to be able to get like a one size fits all, because part of the problem right now with LED panels is that the sizes are all over the place. You know, the majority of them are really small, but then you get the really expensive ones. I mean, heck, at the show, Ari, the lighting company, was there. You know, they have massive LED panels, which I didn't even ask about pricing on, because I can only imagine, you know, what those things are worth. But so will there be soft boxes? There already are. So the answer is yes. Even for the massive Aris, they had soft boxes that basically you assemble the soft box on a frame, and then the frame slides down in the front of it, and you know, you've got a soft box there. And the cool part about the soft boxes for the LED lights, they tend to be thinner in depth. You know, the soft boxes for strobes tend to be deeper, mainly because you've got a smaller light source and you need to get that light spread to create the size of it. Well, for the LED panels, those big bright panels to begin with, you don't have to give it as much depth because you've already got the size built into the panel. So they do exist, and I'm sure that there will be many, many, many more. Mark, there are a lot more Google apps on the iPhone. Yeah, and believe me, I'm using Google just fine on the iPhone. But at the same time, I'm going to look at the efficiencies that I may be missing out on by, you know, going to Google. So it's not like I'm in the process of investigating a lot of changes. I am very worried about where Nikon's going and the pace at which they're doing it. And they've given me enough time to consider, do I need to be a Nikon shooter? No, I'm not going to buy a Sony, and that's not a Sony diss. It's really a matter of, do I need to be a full frame shooter is really a big part of what it comes down to. And I'm not going to get into that debate with anybody tonight, but I'm looking at a lot of things in terms of where I'm going over the next 5 years with the technology that I use, with the equipment that I use. You know, even with regards to lighting and all that kind of stuff, I'm really reevaluating some things, and in part because it's something that I like to do every so often, but as far as where the technology is right now, I think that it's definitely you know, it's something that should be done a little bit more often, not for the sake of, hey, let's switch and spend a ton of money, but for the sake of realizing that we're turning the corner on a lot of technologies, and in a good way, in a very good way. So, all right, let's see. Adobe and Apple alone at their table getting hate, but still the richest guys. Also, yeah, I mean, no argument there, Thomas. You know, pretty much what it is. And again, I'm not. Apple and Adobe have been great as far as I'm concerned, but I'm worried about where they're going. There does, however, seem to be a trend that Silicon Valley companies seem to have lost track of how photographers work, what photographers like, want, need, etc. And I think in part, in all fairness, it's because they got big enough, they were making enough money that, you know, having the professionals use it became a big draw for the consumer. And now, of course, they're making more money from the consumer because, let's face it, Apple or Adobe, they're going to make more money from the average consumer than they are from the professionals, period. So I think that's a little bit of the problem right now. You know, for me, I don't need to have the latest, greatest, best. I simply don't. But what I do need is to have what's going to make my life easier. For me, that's the driving feature for all technology for me. Is it going to improve my quality of life? Is it going to make my job easier? Is it going to allow me to do things better? You know, no disrespect to Sony, but, you know, the Sony a7R III, hey, that's great. But, you know, no different than I didn't run out and buy the Nikon D850. I have a Nikon D810, and the D850 is a beautiful camera. But is it going to make my pictures better or make my life easier? No, absolutely not. So why buy it? You know, that's the point. Doug Thompson, thank you for the super chat there, by the way. I saw the Sony a7R III comment. No, Doug, I didn't diss you, but I did see, just so everybody knows what the joke is here, Doug's in some other group that I also happen to be in, and just randomly over the weekend I caught Doug in that other group asking questions because he was considering buying the A7R3. And I don't remember, so I know he's going to defend himself after I say this. I don't remember exactly what his question was, but it was kind of one of those questions like, is my stuff going to be better if I get this A7R3 thing? Fortunately, somebody beat me to it, and somebody gave him the same lecture that I always give and basically said, look, you're kidding yourself if you think it's going to make your work better, and it's not. So anyway, Ezekiel, I just wanted to calibrate all 3 of my monitors. Somehow one is really more saturated compared to the other, and now it's bothering me more. Looking at the Spider 5, any recommendations? I'll tell you right now, I would actually consider this new i1 Studio. Google it. It's by X-Rite, i1 Studio, really well put together system. I love the simplicity that they have built into the system. So I would actually encourage you to check that out. James Holland, use my technique on reducing eyeglass flare. Awesome, man. It's always much easier than fixing in post. Always. Ton Affinity Photo. I've heard about that. I'll be honest with you. I spent no time with Affinity Photo, so I'm not even going to try and talk about it as if I know what I'm talking about. I don't. But yeah, I would encourage you, if you are looking at making any kind of a change, if you're one of those photographers that is like at your wit's end with Adobe and you feel you need to abandon it, I would take all these pieces of advice you get in terms of brand names and platforms and try them all. Most software companies offer a free trial. Try them all. It's not the kind of change that you want to make as a knee-jerk reaction, like to punish Adobe. I'm whining a little bit about Adobe and Apple and Nikon, but I'm not going to make some knee-jerk reaction and just go bail and move over here. I'm doing tons and tons of research. In fact, I have a package coming tomorrow from borrowlenses.com. I'm renting a camera for 7 days and a lens that I am looking at and considering making a switch. Even if I love it, I'm probably not going to make that switch like immediately, but yeah, I'm starting to explore my options just to to see what's out there, because at the end of the day, I am extremely comfortable with Nikon. I've been extremely loyal to them. You guys know I did use the Sony stuff for a year. This was several years back. But came back to Nikon. I have been loyal to them pretty much my entire photography career. But I'm just not sure that that's the right move for me at this point. And, part of it is I'm reevaluating how many megapixels do we need? How much dynamic range do we need? How much money do I really need to be spending on gear, camera gear? And how much of an impact is that money really having on the final outcome of my work? So believe me, I do practice what I preach, gang, in that sense. And so that's why I'm kind of doing a lot of this, evaluating. Okay. So let's see here. Matthew, I'm glad that I have encouraged you to step up your game. Awesome. The question will be, you'll be joining a group of photographers and you will have to show 3 pictures of yours. Oops. And that's only part of the question. So go ahead and finish the question, and I'll come back to that, okay? Let's see. Doug, you resisted temptation. Good, okay? Doug, in all honesty, man, how's a dual SD slot going to help you? Like, what's that really help? Do you actually, like, fill up your cards that often? Yeah, Anyway, so let's see. Thomas Palmer, the X-Rite thing seems to be really too much for someone who doesn't print. I would disagree, Thomas. I really would. I'm probably going to wind up purchasing one of those iStudios. The reason why I say that is I hardly ever print. In fact, in the last year, I've printed probably no more than 3 or 4 photos, literally, which is extreme for me. But, I mean, it's less and less and less all the time. So I hear where you're coming from. But the fact of the matter is there's still value to printing. And you never know. So, for me, I would rather I'm not paying any extra money for that one feature. Okay. I very much like the fact that I am able to, you know, work across the board, work on the mobile devices, all that kind of stuff, and get everything, you know, coordinated. So, you know, at the end of the day, the spider stuff is great. There are other really, really good options out there. So literally, here's my take, because the one thing I'm not going to do, you're not going to get me to kind of put my, you know, my heels in the ground and say, no, this is the best when it comes to color management. The best when it comes to color management is the color management that you actually do, because that's the biggest issue. So many photographers just, they don't do the color management, or they don't keep up with it, in which case it's not really doing you any good. Color management, literally, and I had a discussion with one of the folks from X-Rite while I was at the test drive prior to PhotoPlus. That was last Wednesday. And you know, we agreed, it came up in the discussion, that color management really is very much the Achilles heel for a lot of photographers, because they're afraid of it. So I am going to be doing some videos later in the fall about color management, and kind of, you know, color management for dummies, guys. You know, I always try to keep things as simple as possible, really just to get people started doing it. It is an important element of digital photography, and one that should not be ignored. So, you know, that much I stand by. So that being said, you know, are there going to be, just like cameras, are there going to, you know, be reasons why one is better than another for different people? Absolutely. So, but I was really very, very impressed with the i1 Studio. Very impressed with what they're doing it there. So, Cathalbo, do you shoot much in high ISO? Recently saw an A3 print shot at ISO 20,000 black and white and was surprised with the quality photo. I don't, but I can tell you I also saw some images that were done at very high ISOs. And yeah, I mean, listen, for all intents and purposes, assuming that, you know, there's no manufacturing issues when that camera actually comes out, it's a beautiful camera. But indeed, you know, let's point out some things. You know, Sony's doing the Apple thing. Good for them. You know, they've built this incredible fanboy base. I had a photographer who shall go unnamed, because if they hear this, they're going to know it's them. And I'm not trying to out anybody. I had a photographer explain to me very recently that for them, the idea of buying a new camera, because, you know, I always talk about the idea that, look, a new camera comes out, you shouldn't rush out and buy this camera. It's kind of stupid, okay? Because that new camera is not going to make your photography better 99% of the time. And this guy's reason for rushing out and buying the new camera is because by getting excited about this new piece of gear, it motivates him to go out and take more pictures. Now, I understand that logic, but I'm sorry. That's problematic as far as I'm concerned. If you have got to be motivated to go take pictures, that's a bigger problem, like a much bigger problem that's got nothing to do with the camera. Okay, so I mean, I guess I can understand how maybe for some people that, you know, motivates them. But I would argue that that's a bigger problem if getting a new camera, getting a new lens, or getting a new something makes it more exciting to go take pictures. No. So, Mark Anderson with a super chat here. Now that you've asked about Photoshop alternatives, do I have a photo processing service that I recommend? I've looked and they seem too expensive. Mark, give me another comment back here. Do you mean like a lab for printing? Or are you talking film developing? If we're talking film developing, I'm really sorry. Find me a new question so I can earn my $5 from you, Mark, because I haven't done film processing in God knows how long, so I have no idea. If we're talking about photo labs, yes. So let me know what you're looking for, and if we're talking about labs, I'll come back and I will definitely dig into that and give you my thoughts. I'll tell you who I use when I do print, which is not that often, but I'll tell you some other companies that I've used that I've had, you know, also great success with. So, Matthew, to pick up on your question on presenting yourself for a photo group or a whole, would you present yourself as a specialist in black and white or portrait, or as a jack of all trades? Oh, so wait a minute, Matthew. Was there another question here? Let's see. So let me back up and see if I can find Matthew's. Here we go. Question would be, I'll be joining a group of photographers. Oh, this is the rest of the question. Gotcha, Matthew. Okay. Have to show 3 pictures of yours. I'm wondering what I should do. Show them 3 different pics, 3 different black and white pics, or 3 portrait pics. So, Matthew, I'm going to assume, okay, so feel free to correct me. Frames by Seb. Thank you so much. I'll get to your question in a second. Matthew, I'm going to assume that you mean like you're joining kind of like the equivalent of like a photography club or maybe like a PPA group or something like that. So they just want to see 3 pictures to get a sense of who you are, what you know, what you're doing. So if that's the case, my response to you is stop thinking so damn much, man. Seriously, show them your 3 favorite pictures. Don't make the mistake, especially if you're kind of early in the process. And when I say early in the process, like if this joining this group is like a big step for you in your progression as a photographer, and more importantly, your development as a photographer, stop worrying about impressing people right now. Impress yourself. Show them the 3 pictures that you have that impress you the most. It sounds to me like the reason why they ask for that, it's literally to get a sense of people. It's no different than in my Facebook group. I ask people to not comment on photos. When they join the group, I ask them to not comment on photos until they've posted 1 or 2 photos of their own. Because otherwise, if somebody just joins the group and suddenly they're critiquing somebody else's pictures, people have no context of where and what the knowledge base is that critique is coming from. Whereas if they posted a couple photos, people have a reference and say, oh, hey, this guy's really good. And then the comments obviously are going to carry a little bit more weight. So it sounds to me like that's essentially what they're doing as you join this group. It's just to get a sense of kind of what you know, who you are, what you do. So trust me, don't overthink it. You know, it's that same lesson our parents teach us when we're kids. You know, it's like, be yourself. Don't feel like you have to justify it or apologize to anybody. And yeah, so literally, don't think too much. If black and white is your thing, show them black and white. If people are your thing, show them people. Whatever your thing is, that's what you should show them. That's my advice there. So, okay. So, Mark, you're looking for a Photoshop service that will edit hundreds of photos. Oh. Okay, easy. Yeah, Mark. Join, if you're not a member, Mark, so I apologize, I can't keep track of all like 9,000 people, right? Okay, if you're not a member of my Facebook group, join my Facebook group. So that's step 1. I'm going to put the link here to the group in the chat window there. So there's the link. You'll be asked 3 simple questions when you go to join. Make sure you answer the questions or the admins will not approve you. And I will gladly give you all the contact information there, but I'll tell you about him. He's a member of the Facebook group, so you'll be able to communicate with him directly from there. I use a service in India to do all my, what I refer to as my base retouching. So I'll give you kind of the quick version of my workflow. I do a shoot. I do all my raw processing. So the equivalent of what you would do in Lightroom or what I do in Capture One, etc. I do all my raw processing. Then what I'll do is, after I've done my edits in terms of, you know, like, okay, it's these 5 pictures that I'm going to have retouched, I will take those images and I create a PSD file with them. And I basically create a blank layer, and with my tablet, I will write instructions all over the photo. Mark it up, you know, fix this blemish, get rid of this stray hair, all that. Mark it up, save it as a PSD file, and then I upload them to them. Generally 24 to 48 hours, I will have the images back with all of the work that I have requested done. It is extremely affordable. It is one of the greatest things that I have ever done from a time standpoint, because it's that blemish removal and the flyaway hair removal and the getting rid of wrinkles removal. That's the time-consuming stuff. So when I get those files back, now I've got images that have had the raw processing done and all the blemishes and the flyaways are removed. Then all I have to do is give them the finishing touch. In other words, my flavor, and the image is done and it's ready to go. I pay $2.50 an image, and I have them do a fair amount of work in terms of detail. I'm really picky on stuff. So the prices are going to be determined by how much work you're needing done in an image. But they do volume stuff. So like, for instance, if you shot a wedding, you want everything to have a certain flavor to the raw processing. These companies will do that. There's lots of them out there. Here's the thing. Just so you know, I'll gladly get you in touch, Mark, with my guy. Okay, he's awesome. He's very attentive, very responsive. I swear the guy never sleeps, because I can get a hold of him on Facebook like any time of the day, and obviously they're on a completely different time schedule there. But working with a retoucher, it's a lot like if you were to go back to my YouTube channel and watch the videos that I have about working with a makeup artist. Okay, I talk about the idea that you can't just say to a makeup artist, "Yeah, do your thing," because you're never going to be happy. You have to be willing to make decisions and tell them what to do. And it's essentially the process of establishing a relationship, because you are asking this person to collaborate with you and impact the outcome of your work. It's exactly the same as a retoucher. So don't think that you're going to find a retoucher and you're basically just going to say, here's my files, make them look good. They can't read your mind. They're not looking through your eyes. So that's not a fair thing to do to any retoucher, because it's just not going to work. So you find a retoucher. The most important criteria is not how good are they. We're going to make an assumption that they're good. The most important criteria is how well can you communicate with them. So even though my guy is in India, he's a great communicator. I have no problems with him. He's really easy to get along with. And so that's a big criteria for me. So, yeah, join the group. I'll make sure you get his contact information. And like I said, he's a member of the group. Quite a few of the members of my group use him now. And he's awesome. So, yeah, it's not like I'm going to keep the secret all to myself. I'll gladly put you in contact with him. Okay? 123 Miseria. Thank you so much, man, for the super chat. So you're hoping to get some recommendations on screens. You're looking to buy a pro-level screen, and you've got a few alternatives picked out, but they went out of stock permanently. 32 inches or bigger. Whoa. Okay, so that's like a seriously big screen. So let me start with the fact that, number one, I haven't personally had to buy a screen in quite a long time, in part because I'm an Apple user. That being said, I kind of try to stay aware of what's out there. And the nice thing about high-end computer monitors is the costs are starting to come down a lot. Now, there are still really high-end ones that are still really expensive. Brands like BenQ, which they're great, but they're pricey. But now on the flip side of that, you can go to a company like Dell and you've got a lot of really, really good options. You are definitely going to want to do color calibration with them, but you should be doing that with the BenQs and the high-end ones anyway. You know, I would encourage you, based on your budget, that's going to be part of the driving factor. If you need to keep the budget kind of under control, I would actually say definitely go look at the Dells. They've actually got some really, really nice stuff out there. If you're looking at the high end, and I need somebody to help me out here, because I told you guys I haven't had to worry about it. There's another brand, starts with an A. So somebody give me that name, because I know some of you guys know that name. There's the BenQs, and there's another one. It's AIZO or something like that. So guys, help me out here and give me that name. They're going to be the two that I would say if you're looking for the high end stuff. Very expensive, but indeed you're going to get a much more high end product too. So a lot of it's going to depend on your processing. So Mark, you're very welcome. I hope that helped out. So I know I missed it here, but I've seen pieces going by. Apparently Doug's answer, or somebody else answered for Doug, was about doing the dual card slots. Yeah, you know, that's cool, but so it's all about taking a risk. For me, honestly, it's never been an issue. I've never had a card fail on a camera ever. Now, keep in mind, I do shoot tether a lot, so my stuff is getting backed up on a computer, etc. But yeah, I mean, Doug, if you want to spend all that extra money just to get a camera for dual card slots, I don't see that as a reason to buy a new camera, guys. I'm sorry, Doug, but I won't. Doug, you just got to admit it. I'm not trying to be tough, man. You want the new camera. If you've got the money, go buy the camera and stop sweating it. But do you need the new camera just for dual card slots? Nah, come on, man. All right. I'm not saying it's not a good feature, but come on, you know? So anyway, I mean, I could make that same argument about, oh, I should go get the D850 for that same reason. No, it's like, there's no reason. So if you like it, get it. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, guys. But the simple fact of the matter is, you know, we're reaching a point where we're putting out cameras that have features that people really don't need. So some people like to feel they've got the biggest and the best, and that's cool. If that's what motivates you, that's what drives you, that's fine. But I know quite a few people that I saw drooling over that A7 R3 at PhotoPlus that are determined to go out and buy one right away. Even some, you know, photographers that I know personally and YouTubers that I know personally. I promise you, when you see their pictures from that camera in another month, their pictures aren't going to look any different than they look now. So, you know, if it works for you. Cool. So, all right. So EIZO, that's it. EIZO, not A. I said A. EIZO, that's the other one. So, Adelipso, say something nice about Canon. They had a lot of really good speakers at PhotoPlus. How's that? That was something nice. I said they had good speakers. They had Lindsay Adler and let's see, Sue Bryce. They had a bunch of people like that. So yeah, I mean, that's something nice. I'm not a Canon guy. What can I say? Canon's like, you know, good stuff. But Kenneth, the EIZO 27-inch, yeah. So EIZO's the other one. You know, really, really good, you know, high-end brand, but a brand that earns that label of being really good. Okay. Do understand, of course, there's a price tag that goes with it. So, Gary Miller, biggest problem for printing is converting RGB to CMYK. But Gary, you're talking about, now correct me if I'm wrong, because maybe you've got an exception, but every photo printing lab that I've ever worked with wants RGB, not CMYK. The only time I've run into needing CMYK is if I'm sending stuff off to a printer to be printed on a press. That's something, Gary, I have to be honest. It's easy to make the conversion, but the real question is getting the colors right. That's something that I stress about every time I do it. I am definitely not an expert on that. So unfortunately, that's probably not something that I will go down the path of making a video about, you know, in that regard. But most photo labs that are printing prints, photographically printing, they want RGB, not CMYK. So I think what you're talking about there is printing for a press. So Jay Sharp, are there a lot of presets for Capture One like there is for Lightroom? I know it's best to learn how to create your own. There are some starting to show up, Jay. But yeah, I'm one of those hardcore guys. I'm not going to give you a lot of sympathy for wanting presets. Just do your own processing, man. Be creative. You know, there are people that use presets the right way, meaning it's kind of a shortcut. But the problem is if you actually really understand what you're doing, make your own shortcut. Otherwise, you might as well just go use Instagram and put all your filters through Instagram. I mean, literally, okay? I would discourage anybody from going that route. The exception being, and I'll give you an example where I'm going to contradict myself a little bit. I'm a big fan of Nik Silver Effects Pro. So what I have done, I've taken a few of their presets as starting points, because I'll be perfectly honest with you, their presets as they are, they're okay. I don't like any of them, none of them, to my taste. So I've taken some of their presets though, and then I further modified them and created my own custom presets within Nik. So when I open up Nik software, or Nik Silver Effects, excuse me, I've got about 8 presets that are in the custom side that are all mine. Every one of them started as one of Nik's presets. So, you know, and it's two things. One, I don't actually like any of their presets as is. And two, I wouldn't want to be using somebody else's preset, because then my work is just going to look like a ton of other people. So for me, that's, you know, that's a big issue. So I had a couple questions from early in the evening here. So let's get back to those real quick. Benjamin Sutton had a question. He was one of the guys that was here early tonight. So I want to go ahead and get an answer for this. So his question was, how you narrow down, and this is actually a good one. So it's why I wanted to get back to this, gang. And then Steven Steger also asked kind of a similar follow-up question. So the question was, how do you narrow down what genre you want to shoot for your business? He goes on to say, is this the same approach to finding your style? Do you just go with whatever sticks? He says, I have a set style and I'm happy with it, but I'm just not sure what I want to shoot. I'm 90% on location, but more and more I've been loving doing in-home studio work. Okay. The second follow-up question from Steven Steger was, do you need to pick a genre or type? He shot weddings or portraits or families and a few local products. Pretty much whomever or whatever wants or needs photographs. All right, so let's start at the end. Let's do Steven's question first and work back into the style thing. So basically, Stephen, I'm going to, not to put words in your mouth, but I'm going to rephrase your question. And he's basically asking, do you need to specialize, or is it okay to be a jack of all trades? Well, we all learn the jack of all trades phrase, right? Everybody knows what a jack of all trades is, but there's more to that label. The full label is jack of all trades, master of none. So if you were following along in some of my older marketing talk chats, when I was doing the Thursday night marketing talk chats, I frequently discussed with people. We had photographers that came in and they were doing portraits and weddings and seniors and that kind of stuff. But then they also had all these really, really cool architectural photos. And so on their website, they had both. In those situations, I gave them the example of do 2 separate websites. Putting them both in the same website is a really bad plan because the architectural people say, oh, architectural is a very specialized, type of photography. To do it right. So, architectural buyers are going to look at that and say, oh, yeah, he's a wedding guy. And yeah, his architectural is not bad, but he's not a full-time architectural guy. And then, people that have done their research and who are also particular buyers, they're going to be looking for a wedding photographer and say, oh, well, yeah, but he does all this other stuff too. I want somebody that's like a really great wedding photographer. Okay. So it's not so much that you have to pick a genre and only do one genre, but from the standpoint of marketing, I would be very, very careful about ever presenting yourself as a jack of all trades, because indeed a jack of all trades tends to be a master of none. If you want to be able to charge top dollar for your work, you need to be an expert at what you do. So that's the answer for Stephen. Now back to Benjamin. So, Benjamin, I got to be honest with you. I struggle with your question. So I got to give you a little bit of tough love here. And I know you're going to want to come back and explain it further, and that's okay. But when you say, how do you narrow down what genre you want to shoot for your business? To me, that's a huge red flag that says you are not ready to go into business. Because that's like saying you need somebody to tell you what your favorite color is. Literally. Like, what do you like shooting? You would be a fool, in my opinion, to go into business doing something that you are not passionate about, doing something that you are not really, really good at. So what type of photography you should do for your business is never, in my opinion, a business decision. In fact, it's not really a decision. It's, what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? So that's a big part of it. A big part of it. And style has nothing to do with it, by the way. Let's be really clear. I have a video all about style. In fact, even in your case, Benjamin, you mentioned style, but then you talk about shooting on location and shooting in the studio. That's not a style to me. That's a preference for how and where you shoot. That could impact your style, absolutely. But I don't consider the difference between a location photographer and a studio photographer a style choice. The style aspect to me is something that's not quite as tangible. It's something that has more of kind of like a feel or a vibe to it. But my honest, sincere advice to you, Benjamin, is you've got to do what you are passionate about. That's what's got to drive that decision. Otherwise, it becomes work. And the minute it becomes work, it's no fun. And the minute it's no fun, you're not going to do great work. So that's what I would, I would recommend there. So the Mectasy, the preset may help you choose the direction you want to go when editing. I've heard that argument many, many times. I respect that a lot of people enjoy having that option. I completely disagree. That's my personal, choice of working. The preset shows me what other people have done. And it influences my decision based on what other people have done and what somebody else has done for me. So I see it as lazy. And I see it as not being particularly creative. It goes back to when you hear me talk about zombie photographers, etc. So I totally get it. I understand the psychology behind it. I completely understand why a lot of people would like it. But I would encourage anybody that it's really serious about developing their photography to a high level, not to get caught in the trap of relying on presets too much. I would really encourage people to, do your own thing and experiment and learn and build and create and simply make it your own. That's really the key there. So, all right. So, wow, look at this. I'm actually doing good on time again. This is like 2 weeks in a row. I'm doing really, really good on time. So let me just back up here, see if there's anything that I missed. Alonzo, I'm thinking about upgrading a little bit my PC. What would you recommend to upgrade first, memory, RAM, or graphics card? Alonzo, both. I mean, literally, you've got three key factors. When you're putting a computer together, your processor and the processor speed. Certainly, at a minimum, you want to be working with an i7 at this point, and as many cores as you can afford. And then, RAM, in my opinion, so this is going to get a lot of people debating. I don't want to do a debate, guys, please. In my opinion, if you're using Photoshop or if you're doing video, you should not be working on anything less than 32 gigs of RAM at this point. Otherwise, you are in for a very painful experience. So I'm working on an iMac Pro that is 32 gigs, and excuse me, not an iMac Pro, an iMac. Sorry, an iMac. It's a 4K iMac. That has 32 gigs of RAM in it, and I am able to bog this thing down very quickly working on 4K video. And even, working in Photoshop, if I open several large files and PSDs at one time, I'm going to slow this thing down. And I follow all the best practices for, using scratch disks, all that kind of stuff. So 32 gig of RAM is a minimum as far as I'm concerned. And then, graphics card, same thing. You want a powerful graphics card that's got as much RAM in that card, dedicated RAM in that card as possible. So yeah, if you're going to kind of, either build your own PC or upgrade your own PC, I would encourage you to look at all three. And even with regards to the processor, if you're working in a machine that's got an older, slower processor, you're going to be a little bit limited in terms of how much upgrading you can do on the RAM and the graphics card. So it may be a matter of looking at all three in terms of, what you need to do. So, Kareem, let's see. TF collaboration question. Is it okay by industry standards? There is no industry standard for TF, Kareem. Not when you're talking about photographers and amateur models. Okay, there's just not. But let's get to your question. Is it okay by industry standards to give the model 1 or 2 photos very nicely edited, even though she expects more, especially when we shot 2 to 3 images in that session? Oh, this is Kareem, I'm sorry, but you stepped on a landmine here. This is one of those questions, man, that drives me nuts. This is not even a discussion to be had. Kareem, you have just outed yourself as being lazy. And the fact that you are struggling with the solution here, it's your fault. Tell me how the model expects more. I know why. She expects more because you did not discuss it with her in advance, because you did not make it clear in writing via email, we're going to shoot this, I'm going to give you this, and ask her to write back and say, yep, we're on the same page. Stop being lazy. Photographers are lazy. This comes from a question from photographers that have not done their due diligence. Instead, what they did, they went on a website like Model Mayhem or Purpleport and found a hot chick. It's like, yeah, let's shoot Saturday at 1 o'clock. Cool, I'll give you images. Don't sweat it. Yeah, we'll be there. Bring a bunch of stuff. That's not how you plan a photo shoot. Okay, so, ironically, you use a professional term, industry standard, but yet you're not dealing like you're actually in an industry, because no professional in any business, in any company, in any field of endeavor would conduct business without setting realistic expectations between themselves and their client. Ever. They wouldn't be able to survive. So your problem is really simple. If you've got a model that's ticked off at you right now, here's my answer to you. You give her whatever she wants because she earned it and you didn't tell her otherwise in advance. So, sorry, but you owe her. In the future, that must be negotiated in advance of picking up the camera. In fact, it should be negotiated in advance of the model showing up for the photo shoot and outlined in an email. Period. So, yeah, sorry, I know that's kind of what you were looking for, but yeah, there's no industry standard. The industry standard is put in the hard work. You have to understand, guys, doing this kind of stuff, whether you're doing it professionally or just for fun, it's not about just picking up a camera. Let's go take a bunch of pictures. Sorry, guys. There's a lot more to it than that. Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's an easy one to solve. You got to put in the hard work up front. Steve Wilking, thank you, man. I appreciate it. So let's see. Thomas Palmer, why still not 100,000 subs with Annistar? Okay, so look, so here's the deal. This will be my last thing for the night. I'm going to give you the abbreviated version, but Thomas, I haven't had a chance to scan the images yet because they're 35mm transparencies. So if you're new to the TogChat or you haven't been here a little while back, it came up one night, and Thomas has asked me like several times since, so I feel like I owe him here. Somebody asked me about have I ever photographed famous people, and no, I'm not a celebrity photographer, but back in my newspaper days, I had the good fortune. I photographed Queen Elizabeth. I photographed President Gerald Ford. I photographed Jimmy Carter, bunch of movie people, Sylvester Stallone, all that kind of stuff. So I was asked like who was, I don't remember if it was like what was my favorite or what was my most impressive one, whatever. But kind of the coolest and craziest story was Princess Diana. So this was in 1982. Okay. In 1982, that was several years after a lot of the IRA bombings that had occurred in London. And in particular, one of those bombings killed Lord Mountbatten, who I believe was the godfather or somehow related to Prince Charles. Okay. So at the time that I went to England, so to back the story up a little bit, my mother is born and raised, or was born and raised in the East End of London. She was one of the children that during World War II was moved out to the countryside, all that stuff. So I have family in England. So my son at the time was 2 years old. My wife had never been there. And so we made a trip to England along with my mother so that we kind of had a babysitter built in. So that the rest of my family and relatives could meet my son and so that my wife could see London. I found out shortly before I went that you could actually contact the press office at Buckingham Palace. And again, this was 1982. They would provide you with a schedule of where the royals would be, because I thought, wouldn't it be cool if I could get some pictures of Princess Diana? Right. So I got there. And literally, like, we're talking old school. So remember, 1982, you couldn't do this today. I got a phone book. I was at my aunt's house the day we arrived, got a phone book, found the phone number for the press office at Buckingham Palace, and called and introduced myself as a newspaper photographer from the U.S. Now, at this point, I was working for a small daily newspaper that had a 22,000 circulation, a small town. But I had done freelance work for, like, the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Associated Press and the newspaper back then. It was also a big paper in Philadelphia called the Philadelphia Bulletin. So I called the press office and said, hi, I'm over here on vacation, but, little white lie is where it started. I would like to, get some images of Princess Diana. My paper has, asked me to try and collect some stuff for stock purposes and for file purposes and that. Can I get a copy of her appearance schedule for the next couple of days? And they're like, sure. What's the address where you're staying at? And so I gave them the address, and that was the end of the phone call. I'm like, wow, that was kind of cool and easy. So the next morning I get up. Two interesting things happen. The first thing is, literally on the doorstep at my aunt's house is a letter addressed to me from Buckingham Palace. And it was literally the entire minute-by-minute public appearance schedule of the entire royal family for the next 7 days. An hour later, I left the house. I was going to a subway station, picked up a newspaper, and the front pages of all the newspapers in town that day were about how this was the first time since the IRA bombing that killed Lord Mountbatten that all of the royal family was in London at the same time because they were going to dedicate a statue to Lord Mountbatten. And that security around the royals was tighter than it's ever been in the past because of the fears of, anything with the IRA. So, okay, fine. Stuffed that in the back of my head. Thought it's going to be really tough to find her. So the very next day, there was on the schedule, she was going to dedicate a wing, a children's wing at a hospital that had just been built. It was in the West End of London. So my wife and I, we arranged for my mother to look after my son. And we decided that we were going to go and see if we could see her. So I had one camera body with me on the trip and a bunch of lenses and a camera bag. Threw those over the shoulder and we went. At being completely naive about this. Like I'm just going to be able to walk up and see her walk in. And I should have known better. I was a newspaper photographer, right? But being hopeful. So we get off the subway where we're going. We walk down the street, and sure enough, as we come around the corner to where this hospital is, I notice a couple of things. Number one, there's tons of people lining the street waiting for her motorcade to come up. Number two, this hospital is on grounds, meaning there's these huge wrought iron fences with trees. You can't even see the hospital. And so at that point, we're realizing, like, great. And by the way, it's misting and raining lightly that day. So we're like, awesome. We're just going to stand around and get soaking wet and just see a car go by. We're not going to see anything. So as we're standing at this intersection, looking down the street, and we can see the gate to the hospital, noticed a couple of photographers walking in the other direction with their gear, you know, on their shoulders. And they basically walked right up to the gate and walked right past the bobbies. And it looked like they just walked in. It looked like they didn't show credentials, nothing. So at that point, my wife at the time, who's my ex-wife, not because of this, but she's like, go. They didn't have passes. You just saw it. They just walked in. You should go. And I'm like, come on, why would, like, you got to be kidding me. We read about the security, and what are you going to do? You're going to stand out here and rain? She's like, just go. You got to do it. Well, I'm not one for, you know, passing on a dare. So we walked back around the corner. I emptied all my gear out and wore it as much as I could to make it look like I had a lot of stuff. So I had an empty bag. And I go walking around the corner. She was going to pick a spot out on the street to watch, and I was going to meet up with her after the princess came and went in the hospital. That was the plan. So I walk down the street, and as I'm getting closer to the gate, there's two more photographers coming the other direction. And I'm like, perfect. If I time myself just right, I can walk in the gate with these guys. And sure enough, there's a bobby on either side of the entranceway. We get there. These two guys turn. They walk in. I'm literally right lockstep right behind him. The bobby steps in front of me. He's like, where's your ticket? And I swear to God, these guys did not show anything, and I could not see them wearing any passes. But he's like, where's your ticket? And I looked at him like, I don't have a ticket. He's like, you can't come in. In my camera bag, I had the letter, the big letter with the whole schedule from Buckingham Palace. It was the only thing that came to mind. So I grabbed this out, and I'm like, I don't understand. I contacted Buckingham Palace and told them that I was here from the U.S. I needed to get some photographs of Diana. They sent me this and said, if I'm here today, I'll have access to her. So the bobby looks at me, he looks at the letter, he's like, I can't do anything about this. He points up the driveway inside the hospital property. It's like, see the guy in the trench coat? Go talk to him. That's the boss. So he lets me through. So I go up and I talk to this guy. So this letter worked once. So I turn on a little bit more amperage as I get to this guy. And it's like, hey, I'm here from the U.S. They tell me I need a ticket. I don't understand. I called Buckingham Palace yesterday, and I'm waving this letter like it is my golden ticket. I called Buckingham Palace yesterday and said I needed to get pictures of Princess Diana, and they sent me this, told me if I'd be able to get pictures of her if I'm here today. I don't understand what the ticket's all about. And the guy looks at the letter, he looks at me, and he's like, I can't help you. He's like, look up there in the press pen. Do you see, and by this time there's like 30 photographers behind ropes, okay? He's like, do you see the woman in the blue trench coat? She's from the Buckingham Palace press office. Go talk to her. So now I'm figuring the gig's up because I'm going to get up there. She's from the press office. She knows exactly what this letter is. She's going to boot me. So I figure, hey, it's worked to get me this far. So I go up the rest of the driveway. I go into the press pen. I walk up to this woman. And by this time, I'm like, okay, be the crazy American. So I'm like, hi, you know, here's my name. I'm from the U.S. I was supposed to do this. And, you know, I got this letter and I just don't understand. Like, I need to get these pictures. She looks at me. She looks at the letter. She looks back at me and she's like, well, you don't have a ticket. That's not a ticket. You're not supposed to be here. But the princess is here. So just don't do anything you shouldn't do. And she walks away and I turn around and here's the motorcade pulling up. So I'm in the press area, got some pictures of her as she came out of the car and fairly quickly walked up to the steps and went in the hospital. And I got a really nice shot of her. She was handed a little flower bouquet, and I got a really nice shot of her kind of looking over her shoulder as she's about to walk in the door. So I'm ecstatic. I'm thinking, perfect. It's not raining yet. I'll go back out. I'll meet my wife. This is really cool. It's going to be a neat story to tell. But none of the media move. So I'm like, well, I can't just go walking out of here by myself. That's going to draw a lot of attention. Nobody's moving. So everybody's just hanging around talking. And so I just hung around and I'm talking to people for a few minutes. And all of a sudden, everybody puts their gear down right there in the driveway behind this little press area and starts walking away. So when in Rome, do like the Romans do. I put my gear down, having no idea if I was ever going to see it again, but walk off with these guys. They took us around the corner to a tent, fed us tea and crumpets. So I hung out in this tent for like an hour and, was talking to all these media people from all over the world, which was just amazing. And finally, everybody's like, okay, she's going to come back out. So we go walking back out. So same spots. I'm literally right at the rope, which is great. I've got this great perspective. And I see they've turned the car around. And across the driveway, there's people that they had let in that are all waving like Union Jack flags. And there were these little girls that were obviously going to present her with some flowers again. So she comes out. I get a couple pictures of her coming down the steps. I'm kind of looking over her shoulder as she's bending over greeting the little kids. But still, it's cool. It's like it's Princess Diana and she's 15 feet away. But then she apparently was supposed to get in the car. And as she was known for doing, instead of turning and coming back to the car, she walked across the rest of the driveway and went to the people that were lined up on the driveway. Well, much different than it is here in the U.S. even then. At that point, apparently that's a cue for the media, or at least it was back then, that none of the rules apply, because literally all the photographers, the 30 some or so that were there, just basically hopped over the ropes and went and just surrounded her. Her security people were clearly not very happy, but nobody could do anything because literally she was pressed in between all these photographers and the people that were lined up. So she's just going along, she's saying hello, and I'm thinking, I had no idea how it was going to play out. So I was kind of staying to the back of the group doing the Hail Mary thing with a wide angle lens, still getting some interesting pictures. But then the best part of the whole thing, and this is the embarrassing part, when she finally leaves the crowd and works her way around, I'm standing like on the back corner of the car because I was afraid to go get in the group because I could tell the security was not happy, but they weren't stopping it. So the most amazing thing about Princess Diana in person, of all the famous people that I've ever met or seen, this was the one person that truly was everything in real life that you ever saw in a picture. She was stunning and she was tall. So she was a presence. So I'm standing by the corner of the car, just really like watching her. Like it was amazing that I was seeing her that close. Finally, she comes walking back around the car. The problem was I was between the car and the ropes. So literally there was that awkward moment where she stopped and very nicely with a nice smile said, "Excuse me," because I was pretty much standing there staring at her. I had to get out of the way and she got in the car, and that's my Princess Diana story. So, but the moral to the story, gang. So seriously, for all of you, and you've heard me say this in the past, shoot first, ask questions later. If you don't take a chance, you never get the shot. You never get the opportunity. And so for me, that was indeed kind of a defining career moment. I didn't really realize it at the time, but it was a scenario where I took a chance, really went out on a limb, and was rewarded for it. And so when I left that day, I knew I had a role film. It wasn't like I had an exclusive, but I knew I had stuff that I had to try and do something with. So I went back to a phone book, found a processing lab in London that processed E6 film quickly, took the stuff to a lab and called UPI, which was United Press International, which they're pretty much gone today, but they were a wire service that was almost as big as the Associated Press at the time. And I was able to sell some images of her to UPI that day. So actually made a little bit of money in the process. But anyway, that's the story. So Thomas, I hope you're happy. I promise I will show you guys. To be clear, I want to be very clear. These are not like the world's most amazing pictures. This was E6 film shot on a really cloudy, rainy day in 1982. But indeed, they were pictures that I got to shoot seeing Princess Diana. So it was really cool. So anyway, gang, thank you guys. I'm glad that you enjoy the stories. So, but I will definitely share more along the way. I am slowly but surely working on a video that kind of gives you a little bit of information about my career and some of the fun things I've done. And honestly, I'm kind of looking back at what some of the kind of key learning moments were for me, that will also put into perspective some of what I teach to you guys. So, Kevin Kassar, except for plan shoots where you ask questions first and shoot later, right? Well, yeah, I mean, that's the irony of what I do now, Kevin. Now I'm not a newspaper guy. Now everything is very planned. But even the planning, and I've said this many, many times, I do all the planning so that I can have those moments of serendipity where things will just happen in an unexpected way and I'll be ready for them. That's the key. So yeah, there's such a thing as over planning, and I'll be talking about that in some future videos. But the planning for me allows me the ability to have some space, some breathing room, some kind of comfort room where I can experiment, where I can play a little bit, and where that serendipity can happen. Certainly as a newspaper photographer, there's still a fair amount of planning that you had to do, but you didn't have the control. So planning was very key, but you didn't have the control. So you really did have to be ready for, you know, pretty much anything in that sense. So gang, listen, once again, thank you for spending a great Monday night with me. I really, really appreciate it. More videos coming this week and another TogChat next week. So you guys know the drill. Please, whatever you do, you know, yeah, I'm going to play the recording, but seriously, get out there, take pictures. Take lots of pictures. Practice. And of course, remember these words. Thanks again.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now go pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot, it's your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.